Hello, and welcome to Increasing Employee Engagement. I'll be your instructor, Todd Morrison. This webinar is brought to you by the South Carolina LTAP. And in today's webinar, we want to talk about how do you effectively motivate and engage your employees. That's a tough task and one that is of extreme importance. But how do we do that? Let's start off by saying, what is motivation? Motivation and engagement. What is that? Well, we could define it as saying it's the ability to get your employees to do what you want them to do when you want it done. And not because you're beating them with a stick, but because they want to do it. And this is something that can absolutely be done. It's not easy, but it can be done. As part of my background, I retired from the Department of Highways. And while I was there at the Department of Highways, I had crews that ranged anywhere from 7 individuals on that crew to 11, 13, 27. And at one point I was a branch manager for maintenance and operations, 225 employees. And I really dove into how do you motivate these employees? How do you get them to engage? How do you get them to do these things that you need done? Again, because they want to do it. And that's some of the information that I'd like to share with you today. And when we talk about DOTs, when we talk about county and city governments, man, I got to tell you, it is a different world than any other type of work environment because you're dealing with not only planned work, but emergency work. We might get called out in the middle of the night to clean up a tree or to handle damage from the hurricane that's come in, or perhaps it's working with some type of fatality or roadway issue. So sometimes it's planned. A lot of times, though, it's emergency type work. And the individuals that are working for us, they have to use a wide array of tools and equipment. Anything from shovels to the backhoe to the skid steer to the grader, etc. And a lot of different materials that they're working with. And while they're doing this, facing all these challenges, different materials, different repairs that need to be done, a lot of it under emergency conditions, they also have to do this oftentimes under traffic. We might have some work zone traffic control closing that lane off, but there's still traffic coming by them. I mean, really, nowhere else are you asked to do a job while that piece of equipment is continuing to operate. It's really unique. So why are you listening to this webinar? Well, I hope that as you're listening to this, you're trying to improve your skills in getting your employees to be motivated and to be engaged. And I hope that you understand how important highway, road, and street maintenance is. To me, it is extremely critical. The jobs that you have, the jobs that I've done in the past where we went out and picked up items off the roadway, where we trimmed vegetation, where we ditched, where we made sure that the culverts were open, that we pothole patched. All these items that we do with routine maintenance, they are very, very important. They're very important to the traveling public. And what happens if we don't maintain the roadway? Well, here's what happens. If we fail to maintain the roadway, the numbers of people that get injured or the numbers of people that get killed on our roadways goes up. We're no longer able to have a safe and efficient transportation system. In South Carolina, there's over 1,000 fatalities on average every year on the roadways. If we didn't have good maintenance going on, then you're looking at that number being much, much higher. So the job that you have to do is super critical. Getting extra work out of engaged, motivated employees, again, increases our ability to make that roadway safer and more efficient. And honestly, that begins with the supervisor, uh, the crew leader, really begins on the front line. Here's a couple of photos that I want to share with you that just again illustrate how important maintenance is. And it's something that we use to help motivate our employees because we often found that they didn't really see the big picture unless we told them what it was. They oftentimes didn't realize how significant their job was. Being in maintenance, highway maintenance is not glamorous. You might have just got done with lunch and somebody calls in and there's a dead deer out there on the roadway and you got to go get it and pick it up. That's not a very fun job, not a very glamorous position, but it is vital to the public. And you definitely won't know all the people that you save, but you will realize the ones that you miss. And that happened to us. I had a crew, this particular crew, the county has about 60,000 people in it. It's one of the larger crews, had 20 maintenance workers on this particular crew. And we had decided back in the fall of that year that we were going to go around and mark all the trees that we thought um, could be a potential killer. And we were looking at trees that were above a certain size. And then we were also looking at trees that were very close to the roadway. And we thought, man, we need to take those out if we can. And we determined that we could take out about 30 trees or so over the wintertime, utilizing some of the extra time that we had, plus the bucket truck when we could borrow it from the Division of Traffic. We had some guys on the crew that we had hired in from Asplund, and they were really good at removing trees. So we marked 30 of these monsters down on a list and said, man, we're going to try to get these trees out this winter. Well, I was out that winter taking some photos of snow and ice, and I came across this tree. This is one of the ones we marked. And what do you see there? Well, if you look real close, you'll see a memorial. And just above that, you'll see an X. So what does that mean? That means that we marked this tree in the fall. And then that winter, this is one of the trees that was on our list, but we hadn't got to yet. All right. We hadn't got to it yet. Somebody left the roadway. And actually, I looked the accident up. And what had happened is a young couple came into the main city for a date night. It was a Friday night. On the way back home, they were driving back. The lady was driving. They dropped off the right-hand shoulder of the roadway, encountered a little bit of a drop-off there, shoulder drop, overcorrected, came back up on the roadway in a skid, out of control, slid across the roadway, and the passenger door impacted this tree. The boyfriend who was sitting in the passenger side was caught in that impact and died right there. And I got to tell you, this left a uh, mark on our crew. It had a dramatic impact on us because we looked at that and we got to thinking, man, that's something that didn't have to happen. We looked at the situation. I'll show you the picture again. The original picture, when they left the roadway there, that's a fairly flat slope. If that tree hadn't been there, they would have hit the fence. Maybe they would have been injured, but they probably wouldn't have died. And then we got to thinking about, man, how many days did we maybe come into the barn a little bit early? We got finished with one project, it was cold, came in, or some of the days when we decided, you know what, it's time to work on equipment rather than go out today because the weather's not all that nice. We'll just stay in. And we got to really wondering, could we have got to this tree? And we used this to illustrate to the crew how important it is. And if we do our job right, if we get to these locations beforehand, we'll never know how many people we save. But if we get it wrong, man, it's bad. Here's a young man that lost his life. In my opinion, didn't have to if we tried a little bit harder. So if you're wondering why you're here, if you're wondering why you're listening, that's why. You want to get every ounce of effort out of your crews that you can. So I want to go through some of the items on how we can do that. And the first thing you got to think about is your organization successful? How are you doing now? And it's different in government than it is out in the business world. In the business world, most of the time we're looking at the dollar. How much money are we making? In government, though, making a profit isn't the focus. Hitting targets, though, is. You're likely to have a field operations guide manual like we did, and it said that each activity had a certain level of accomplishment. If we were mowing, we were expected to get X number of acres per day. If we were ditching, then we were expected to get so many tenth of a mile segments each day. We had accomplishments. We even had annual goals. For example, all the roads were to be ditched prior to resurfacing. So whatever was coming up for resurfacing had to be ditched, the cross drains addressed if needed to, prior to that resurfacing occurring. That's one way you could measure success. Maybe a lack of complaints. You could measure success that way. Maybe not having to repeat jobs over and over again. If you go out there, you fix it, and it stays fixed, that could be success. So success is really determined by what did you do versus your intended goal. And by the way, we could also do that with fatalities. South Carolina has over 1,000 roadway fatalities. Maybe working together, we can bring that down by 10% over the next 2 years, maybe 20%. That could be the goal that we establish. And those are individual targets, but the overall mission, this is very close to being the mission statement for almost every agency that I've looked up. They all include something about having a safe and efficient transportation system by managing the available resources, doing the best job you can with what you have. As a matter of fact, if you look up the South Carolina DOT's vision, it's the goal of the department: provide adequate, safe, and efficient transportation for the movement of people and goods. And I'm sure if you look up your city or county, it's going to be something similar. And how do we do that? How do we get a safe and efficient transportation system? Well, we got raw materials, rock, blacktop, concrete. We have equipment that we use: graders, dozers, backhoes, skid steers, and we got people. And the most important one of those to your organization is the people. And when we look at organizations and we try to measure success, understanding that people are the most important, I want to show you the difference between average organizations and successful ones, average cities and counties and successful ones. Both of them have people join. They come to work for them. Both of them have people stay with the organization. Both of them have people perform at that minimum level, the minimum amount to keep your job and keep working for the city or the county. But the ones that are successful, they figured out how to get people to go above the minimum. And that's really what we want. As an organization, we want 4 things from our employees. We want them to join us, to stay with us, to perform at a minimum level, and then to perform above that minimum level. And as you're doing some soul searching, maybe you're trying to figure out how to get your organization to be better, think back and consider, why did you join? And why would people want to join your city or county now? And maybe, how can you highlight those reasons why that they would want to come to work for you? Also, what keeps people away? Why do people not want to come to work for you? And is there anything you can do about that? Once they join you, we have a problem in today's world where people don't stay. The millennial generation, one of the largest groups in our workforce today, their average time on a job is somewhere around 2 years. So why don't they stay? Well, employees have a lot of expectations when they come to our jobs. They expect it to be a certain way. When they get there, sometimes it's like what they thought it was going to be, sometimes not. If it's not what they thought it was going to be, then they might start looking for greener pastures. The grass is always greener on the other side of the fence. And this little diagram shows what we would like to have as far as levels of performance from our employees. The minimal amount that is set with our policies and our procedures. There's a certain level of work you're going to do, or you're not going to be employed for us anymore. And then there is the expected amount that's going to be enforced by the crew leader. But where we really want to go is in the green area. We want to get to exceptional. There, if you're listening to this as a first line supervisor, you also need the backing of the organization. So it's your higher ups, your upper level management, they got to back you, they got to support you. They have to create an environment that is conducive to people wanting to perform above that minimum level. So it takes you, the crew leader, and the organization both to get up to exceptional. So I got a couple of things I'll go through on what the organization and the crew leader should do, and then I'm going to talk about the employee, because the employee has a huge part to play in this as well. I mean, they're the ones actually doing the work. They're the ones that we're trying to get the productivity from. One of the first things that I'd encourage you to do is to let the people working for you know about the mission, safe and efficient transportation system. Give them some real world examples of areas that you've helped, areas where maybe you didn't make it. Like I showed you with that tree earlier and the young man that lost his life there. Let them know that the work they're doing is important. On this list, you also see match individuals' capabilities with the job. Yeah, you definitely want to put people where they can excel. You want to do them whenever possible. We can't always do this because emergency situations call for all hands on deck. But whenever possible, you try to put them to where their strengths are so they can do the best job. I'll never forget one day, I was talking to our new network coordinator for our highway district. This guy had just been hired. Mike was his name. I'm talking to him, and I found out he was retired from the Army. And I always like to ask, hey, what was your job in the military? What was your job in the Army? And he said, well, as luck would have it, I was a grader operator. It turns out this guy had spent 20 years running a grader for the military. He didn't see the job openings that we had over on the maintenance side. He saw the job opening there as a network coordinator. He had some training after the military with that, and that's what he got hired for. And to be honest with you, he was a fantastic grader operator. And so whenever possible, I tried to get him over to our side of the organization, doing a job that he had much more capability and skill with. Other things that the organization, the crew leaders should do is the top bullet point really says, let the employees know what you expect of them. Give them explicit instructions. Here's what I want you to do. Here's when I need it, where it's to be done, who, how much I expect you to accomplish every day. Clear expectations. The best bosses, the best supervisors I've ever had never left me wondering. I always knew exactly what they expected, and I always knew when I failed to meet those. And that was good. I like that because I like knowing what do you actually want. The worst ones were the ones that never really said anything until it became evaluation time, that annual meeting where you found out, hey, I didn't live up to this guy's expectations. I didn't even know I was supposed to be doing that. So tell them what they're supposed to be doing. Whenever you can, give them the tools they need to do the job with. I know budgets are limited, you can't always, but definitely do that. And this talks about evaluating performance to see where it can be improved. And if we had more time, we would go into the fact and deeper into the fact that that doesn't need to be just the annual review that I mentioned. That's got to be done on a continuing basis. We need to continually provide feedback to our employees. I really used to think of myself more as a coach of a basketball team. You wouldn't wait till the season is over to tell your center where they need to be standing, would you? No. If they were doing something wrong, you wouldn't wait months to tell them. You'd tell them right then because you want them to get it done correctly. And that's the way we do performance. It's a continual, ongoing performance evaluation. And then when they get it right, we want to reward them. Think about a young child that's just beginning to learn to walk. Do we jump all over them every time they fall down? No. When they get it right, we encourage them, and they continue to want to do that. Other things that the organization, the crew leader should do, you got to give workers a chance to develop and use their skills. Some workers really want to make decisions about their work. In other words, some workers want to be crew leaders, and that might be just crew leader for the day. But some workers want to be into management, and you have to evaluate that need that they have and then see if they're any good at it, and maybe eventually move them into it or move them towards that. Let them do that occasionally. Let them practice that skill. And there are some others that should never be in charge. And unfortunately, some of those are in charge, and it's an unfortunate situation, but that happens sometimes, especially in government. Let's see, a couple other things here is one, let the workers know what the big picture is. Take a little bit of time to tell them what's going on. Nobody wants to be treated like a mushroom. I used to say sometimes I felt like they were keeping us like mushrooms, um, in the dark, feeding us a lot of manure, and we didn't really know what was going on. And nobody likes that. We want to be informed. Informed employees tend to trust their employer more. And the last one here is discipline workers when necessary. Nothing worse than a boss who has somebody coming in late every day and does nothing about it. That kills morale for the rest of the crew. So when discipline is needed, good bosses do that right away. And again, in some other sessions, hopefully we'll be able to get into that and go deeper into how do you discipline them effectively. All right, so that's the organization. That's the crew leader. That's what they can do. But now I want to talk about getting that employee to do the job because they want to. So let's talk a little bit about that. Why do people work? Theodore Roosevelt's got a great quote. Far and away, the best prize that life offers is a chance to work hard at work worth doing. So part of what they want is job significance, job meaning. And that's key, or that's integral. So if people feel like their job is valueless, they're not going to stay with it, no matter what you pay with, no matter what you pay them. And several studies have shown this. They had one study where they paid college students to dig holes and then fill them up. And each day they increased their pay a little bit by a little bit. And by the end of a week, nobody was left working, even though they were paying 2 to 3 times what they could make somewhere else. Because once they realized that all they were doing was digging holes and filling them back up, these guys didn't stay. And that's what happens with our workers too. So build that significance in. That's really important with the millennial generation as well. More than any other generation, they're looking for job meaning and job significance. So if we want them to join, stay, and perform above the minimum level, we got to build that in. But I don't want you to think that everybody who comes to you, their only need is job significance, because everybody that comes to you has different needs, different things that they want from their job. And as a supervisor or crew leader, you got to figure that out and take advantage of it. So I want to go over some of these. This comes from Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And it starts off on the left-hand side, the green bar, that's basic, right? Basic needs are food, clothing, shelter. I'll go over that a little bit more in just a second. Above that, once they get that met, then we move on to social needs, and that's being around other people. After that, we have growth needs. Growth needs means that they want to continually be improving. They want the chance to learn how to run the backhoe. They want the chance to learn how to operate the grader, or maybe they want the chance on the construction and engineering side. Maybe they want to learn how to run the survey equipment. And then on the right hand side, you see self esteem. Everybody has varying amounts of self esteem needs. And that really starts at the basic and it goes all the way up through social and growth. So let me talk about these a little bit more in depth. When people first come to work for us, remember I asked you, why did you come to work for your city or county? Oftentimes, it's because they're hungry. I started with the highway department, um, 17. I started with them, and man, I needed a job. When I got out of school, got out of college, and I went to work for them full time, I was just newly married. And when I graduated college, and I had nothing to my name. I think I had about a half a pack of no-dos, and that was my total net worth. And I just got married. I remember we had like 250 bucks. And I remember thinking, man, this has got to last me a while. That's got to turn on all the utilities. That's got to buy groceries. And the way the state worked back then, when I worked for the DOT, you had to work a month before you got a paycheck. So for me, in the beginning, it was basic food, shelter, clothing. That's one of the basic needs that employees have. They also want to have a working environment where they feel safe and comfortable. You don't want to have any kind of harassment or discrimination going on. And then everybody really honestly has a basic need to be a contributing member of society. That makes people feel good about themselves. Once they get those basic needs met, though, once I had money to keep the lights on and to pay rent and had a little bit of emergency fund, then it goes on to social needs. And that is you really wanting to be with other people. If you think about it, sometimes we spend more time with the people that we work with than we do our own family. And you develop some really tight bonds. I retired from the highway department, and some of those guys that I worked with for 20 years, I saw them more and spent more time with them than I did my own brother. And actually, today, if I were to break down, if I had a flat tire out here on the interstate, I needed some help, I'm calling my friends, my buddies at the highway department, the guys I worked with for 20 years, and I'm not calling my brother because the relationship is stronger there. And that's a social need that everybody has. And to some degree, some people have a small amount and some much more. So whatever the strongest need is, basic social or these others that we're going to talk about, you got to figure out what that is and then try to meet that need, not all the time, but just when possible. And then some employees have a really strong growth need. They really like to learn new things. When that new software program comes down the line and you need somebody to do it, there's probably somebody on your crew that would love to jump on that chance. I remember when I worked on the maintenance side about half the time. The other half the time I worked on the construction side. And I had one of the guys on the construction crew, Tom was his name. And man, he loved anything new about surveying. So the first time we got a total station, that was Tom's baby. Tom went to the training. Tom took care of that machine. Tom learned how to use it. And I selected Tom for that job out of the 11 other people that were on the crew at that time because I knew that was something that Tom loved and he would be all over it. And once I just pointed him in the right direction, I didn't have to worry about it. We would have that ability to use the total station, the surveying equipment. And that's true with other things as well. Um, it could be that You've got somebody on the maintenance side, you've hired them in, and now they want to learn how to run the backhoe. Well, you know what? You can't do that a lot of times during the day, during normal operations, because you got to get some productivity. But maybe on a rain day, you could say, "Hey, it's raining today. We're not going to be able to go out. If you want to get the backhoe and go out here to the back lot and work with some of the stockpiles, get familiar with the equipment, go ahead." And that'll help build that or fill that growth need that they have. And then around all three of those, the basic, the social, the growth, we have self-esteem needs. We all want to be proud of our work. Um, we all want to have a purpose for what we're doing. And quite honestly, most of us like to receive recognition. And not all to the same degree, but most of us do. And there's a lot of ways that you can reward or recognize or praise employees. I had another person on that same crew, Paul was his name. And man, Paul worked off of recognition. He did a lot of great work, but if you complimented him on his great work, and he loved it, he would eat it up. Actually, honestly, if I talked to Paul correctly, I could probably get him to run through a concrete wall. That's how much he personally fed off of self esteem. And again, remember the goal is safe, efficient transportation system. And so if we can help these employees meet some of their needs, they're going to produce more. And that's going to help us meet some of our productivity needs. It's really a win win for everybody. They're happier, they're more engaged, they're more satisfied. We get more done. And everybody has different levels. They some are just purely basic, that's their highest need. Some are social, some are growth, some are fed by self-esteem needs, praise, recognition. But nobody ever really stays the same. And that's something you also have to look at your employees and realize things could change. That young individual that came single, now they're married and they're expecting their first child. Well, all of a sudden they may have went from social to basic. Now they know there's a huge need in the family and they're going to have to get some more money in. So things happen um, that change people's needs. And we just, as supervisors, as crew leaders, we have to be aware of that. And this is really the circle of how it works. So I want to share this with you. Workers come to us with several needs. That's in the red at the top. From those needs, they develop wants. I'll give you an example of that. Let's say it's lunchtime and you get a need to eat. And you're trying to think about, and by the way, that was a huge topic of conversation when I worked for the DOT. We usually started about an hour and a half before lunchtime trying to decide what we were going to have for lunch. Big part of the day. But we would have that need and then we decide, how are we going to fill that? Well, maybe it was pizza day. Maybe it was barbecue day. Let's say we decided that we wanted some barbecue to meet our need of being hungry. Well, that's how this works. Workers have that basic social growth, self esteem needs, and then how they try to meet it, those are their wants. And they are motivated to get whatever the strongest want is at that moment. And once they get that, then they're going to be thinking about what's my next strongest want. So if you can figure that out, and again, not always, but occasionally feed their need, their job satisfaction, their employee engagement is going to go way up. Does that mean I have to keep a notebook or a diary where I'm writing down notes on all the employees? No. But just try to be aware of it. Just keep some mental notes. They'll tell you what their needs are, um, about what they enjoy. If you listen to them, which that's a great skill, supervisors should listen to their employees, but listen to what they say and the things that they ask for, you can begin to figure out what is their highest need. They're going to let you know. So, how do we address those? If it's a basic need, then maybe you try to shoot a little bit more chances for overtime to them. If they're trying to get some more money just to survive, perhaps you talk to them about what's there for them advancement wise. How do you get from an operator one to an operator two? All right, so Joe, what do you need to do to get from operator two to operator three? Here's some things that I would expect you to be able to do before you can move up. And if it's not possible, hey, you got to make sure they know why. So on the construction side, at one point we had a pyramid type thing where and it wasn't a pyramid scheme, but we had an engineering technician level one, two, and three. On our office, there could only be two tech threes and four tech twos, and everybody else was tech ones. Regardless of what their merit was or anything like that. That was just the structure. So you had to let them know if those top positions were filled, you got to wait for one of these people to retire, move on, leave, something like that before we could consider moving into that position. You need to get yourself ready, make yourself a great candidate for it, but that's why we're not doing it at this point. Social needs. How do you address those? Well, maybe you put them on a job that has a team effort. Maybe they're doing pothole patching or guardrail repair that day, as opposed to mowing all by themselves or replacing signs all by themselves. Conversely, you might have an employee who has zero social need. They don't like working around other people, and they do a lot better job and stay out of trouble when they're working by themselves. I've had employees like that before, so I tried to pick solitary jobs for them to get the most that I could out of that person. Then how about the growth needs? Right, growth needs are addressed by anytime something new comes down the road, let these individuals that really want to grow take hold of it. If you get the opportunity to send 3 employees to work zone technician training, and you got your 2 crew leaders going in 2 of the spots, you got one other spot. Hey, maybe it's this person on the crew that really wants to learn new things and enjoy being certified. Send them. Uh, this says making decisions, so maybe try them out in that supervisory role, not put them in the role, not promote them and then figure out if they're going to be good at it, but let them be crew leader of a small crew for a day. Send out 3 individuals and they're the crew leader. See how they do. Or give them the opportunity, like I said, maybe to run the backhoe on rain days on the back lot to get some training in. These are all ways that we can address those growth needs. Now, self-esteem is my favorite as far as the needs, because to me, that was one of the easiest ones to meet. You can do that with awards, recognition, give them special job assignments. I mean, there's 50 or 60 things that come to mind right away that we could do to address someone's need for self-esteem. And really, I tell you what, one of my favorite things is when I could find, when I was out, I lived in a small community, so I would be out occasionally shopping, Walmart, uh, Lowe's, someplace like that, and I'd see one of the guys that worked for me, and he might be there with his family. Well, I didn't lie, but if this guy really was, or this lady really was a stellar employee and was important to us, I made sure their kids knew. I'd stop, we'd talk. I'd, ask about the kids. I'd get down and talk to their children. And then I'd tell them, I'd say, hey, you know what? Let me tell you something. I want to thank you for letting your mom or your dad come to work for us. I know it's taken them away from you during the day, but man, the job they do for us is really important and they're good at it. They really help us shine as a transportation cabinet and they're saving lives out there. So I want to thank you and you should really be proud of your mom and dad for that. You do that and that cost nothing. But you want to talk about building loyalty for the organization and giving them a lot of self-esteem. Yeah, self-esteem oftentimes cost nothing. Now you can do that also with special monetary awards, and those that have basic needs might be driven by that. You can combine the two, but Think about opportunities like that, ways that you could reward the employees. Again, you don't want to do it falsely, but when they do a good job, let them know. So that might have seemed a little bit confusing to you. I talked about needs, wants, how that ties into productivity. So let me give you this example. Let's say that your job is to put out a forest fire, all right? And the only way you can get water to the fire is in this bucket. And this bucket is your crew. And you're carrying water to put out the fire with your crew. The problem is, though, your bucket has a lot of holes in it. These holes are the needs of your crew: the social, the basic, the growth, the self-esteem needs that they have. But here's the good news. The good news is you've got a lot of patches to help you carry water, to get production, to get productivity, to put out that fire. And many of us feel like we're putting out fires every day in the highway business, right? You take these patches or these wants, what the employees would like, what motivates them, you put them in the right spot because they're not all the same. This employee doesn't want what the other employee wants. And now all of a sudden you can carry more water. And you start at the bottom with the basic needs first. And then as you have time, again, this isn't something you focus on every single day, but as you have time, you start filling in some of these higher needs because that's going to allow you to carry more water. That's going to move you from performing at the minimum level to performing above the minimum. It's going to move you into being an exceptional organization. But over time, once you get it figured out, you can't let off the accelerator. Might ease up a little bit, but you can't stop feeding gas because over time, things change. Life happens. And the needs of your crew, your individual crew members, they also change. Sometimes you get more basic needs. Now they're starting a family, or sometimes it's a higher need. I had one individual that he could have retired many, many years ago. He was a 40-year employee of the highway department. He was actually losing money by coming to work because they would have paid him more retired than he was making coming to work every day. Crazy. And we asked him, uh, Ron was his name, and I said, Ron, why are you coming to work, man? I mean, I'm just curious. I'm a young kid here, and I'd like to learn. Why are you still coming to work? And he said, I really like my job and I like the people. And so I'm coming in every day because I don't want to go home and sit by myself. And so this guy had a really strong social need now at this point in his career that was being met by coming into work. And that's what happens to us. Our needs and our wants change, but if we can match up the patches that we have to the holes in the bucket, then we can get more done. So really to wrap it up, a couple of key points. One, while our city or county wants 4 things from its employees, remember we want them to join, to stay, perform at a minimum level, and then perform above the minimum. The individual workers want a whole list of different things from their jobs. But that list varies person to person. And what they think is most important varies from person to person. So as a good supervisor, we want to figure out what are their wants and their needs. And whenever possible, we use that as a carrot. All right, we use that as a carrot to get more effort out of them because employees really come self-motivated. You just got to figure out what the proper um, way to meet that motivation, the proper way to get that motivation started. And that is by finding out what their needs and wants are and giving them an opportunity when you can to do that. And that's really why people engage. That's what I hope you take away from this. Hope that this has helped you understand how to effectively motivate and engage your personnel. And I hope that you start thinking about it, the people that are working for you, the people that are working with you, start trying to figure out what are their needs. Is it growth primarily, social, basic, self esteem? And then if you're listening as a crew leader or a supervisor, start trying to meet some of those needs as you can. Because again, it's important. The work that you're doing, critical to the public, critical to the public safety. It can definitely save a life. And if you could just get 10% more productivity out of your workers, man, think about how many lives you can save and how we might get that number of over 1,000 fatalities in South Carolina every year down. Can we get that to 900? Can we get it to 500? I know we can get it lower, and that's where you guys come in. Appreciate you watching. If you'd like to check out our website, we encourage you to do so. There are a lot of other training opportunities and resources that you'll find there. And thank you for listening.